I say immigration. Immigration. You're fed up of hearing about immigration. Not today, I don't mean, but in general. I mean, it's the number one political topic at the moment is immigration. And heading the polls is Reform, who I would say their fundamental selling point is being an anti-immigration party. Now, I think it's a bit unfortunate when you end up with a party that's like unique selling point has been anti-immigration. It really would be better if more broad parties could get a grip on the issue and enact the will of the people. But it's not Reform's fault. It's not their fault that the Conservatives and Labour have ignored the will of the people of the UK, the people of Scotland for generations and have really made a mess of immigration policy. And that's made a huge opportunity for reform. Now, of course, the problem if you have a party whose main selling point is, I don't mean anti-immigration in a bad sense, concerns about immigration, then it's in that party's interest to cast immigration in the most negative light possible. And then people will think, oh, yeah, that sounds really bad. We need to support reform. And that's not really an ideal dynamic. That's not a dynamic we want to get into with the family party. I'll read you just a paragraph from our policies about immigration. It says, as well as contributing economically, immigrants bring much to our culture, often including positive values of family, responsibility, education and industry that have been eroded somewhat in Scotland. I think that's a really important thing to have right at the beginning of our policies. I think sometimes with immigration, we can live in this sort of, twin universe. There's the universe of what you watch on TV or GB News, or you get on and that's immigrants. It's really awful, really terrible things going on. And they're not making it up. It's true. It's true. They're not lying. These are the things going on. But then maybe you go to work or you go to your church or whatever, and you meet immigrants. And they're great people. So there's this disconnect with sort of media world and reality for us. So it's a very sensitive issue. We need to be very careful. Now, you hear some talk these days about immigrants being invaders. And, you know, there are some elements that seem like that. Sometimes, okay, fair enough. But very often, I'm seeing immigrants as reinforcements. The people come to the country who share our values, who share our principles. Now, the thing with reform, imagine, I want you to imagine, okay, imagine you're having a nice, relaxing hot bath, okay? And there's only one slight problem with this hot bath, and the problem is you've lost the plug, okay? So you can't find the plug anywhere, but you have an idea, you've got a great idea. What you're going to do is turn the taps on and keep the taps on all the time, so the water's coming in at the same rate it's going out of the plug, and you'll be fine, you'll be able to have your bath. So you lie and soak there for a couple of hours. Eventually someone comes and bashes on the door and they say, look, there's no hot water left. You've been in there for ages. I've had enough of this. You can't, this is going to cost a fortune. You've got to turn the taps off. You say, okay, I'll turn the taps off. And then what happens? Before too long, you're not having a bath anymore. You're just sitting in this cold tub with a few bubbles around and it's all gone wrong. And that's what it's like with immigration. It's all very well for reform to say, you know, net zero immigration, we're going to stop immigration. So what's the population just going to fade away? You know, because that's what's projected to happen. The population decline will be catastrophic. The nation won't be able to function. The hardship and grief that would result would be absolutely catastrophic. Now, if someone was here from Reform, they'd say, oh, we've got some policies about trying to increase the birth rate a little bit. We've got some policies about that. Well, they might have some sort of half-hearted, watered-down policies by our standards on that. But isn't there hearts in them? If you took the average, took a random 100 Reform supporters and said, right, tell me about what's important to you, what would they be saying? Immigration, net zero. That's what you hear again and again. Would you find one of them saying, well, I think promoting family life, that's actually what's most important to me. That's why I'm in Reform. That's not, no. So they may talk about it a little bit, but Reform, 100% cut in immigration, 5% if you're lucky, trying to improve the birth rate, increase the birth rate. That is very out of balance. Now, our policies, we voted on them some earlier on. I think we've got a very realistic, quite a stern approach to illegal immigration. It's a crime and it needs to stop. When it comes to legal immigration, we need to be intelligent about it. You can't solve the world's problems by allowing rich people in poor countries to move to become poorer people in rich countries. That's not the way to solve the problems of the world. There are hundreds of millions, literally hundreds of millions of people in poor countries who want to move to rich countries and would do if there were no barriers to them doing so. But it's not possible, it's not sustainable, it's not realistic. So the immigrants that are here, we want them to assimilate. We don't want to import problems. We want a united society seeking the common good. Now, we want to deal with these issues without demonizing or stoking up division and hostility. Now, one of the ways to do this, I've been looking about this. If you've been watching my little videos, you might have heard a bit about this. I mean, one of the things with immigration policy, the reason why the country can't control its borders is because of the European Convention of Human Rights. And there's quite a head of steam now to withdraw from that. And we're behind that. We can replace it with the British one. You can still have the same protections, but we don't need the European Court of Human Rights. Without the European Court of Human Rights, the UK wouldn't have to have a Gender Recognition Act. Currently, we do. So if the Scottish Family Party became the Scottish government, and we said, right, Gender Recognition Act doesn't apply in Scotland, the European Court of Human Rights would say, no, you cannot do that. You're not allowed to do that. And currently, they win, because we've handed over power to them. There's currently a case in the European Court of Human Rights where a polygamist from Yemen is trying to get his 3 wives and 13 children admitted to the Netherlands on the grounds of family reunification. The Netherlands have said, no, we don't recognize polygamous marriage. So what does the man do? He takes them to the European Court, and the judgment is awaited. And it may be that the European Court will say, no, you have to recognize polygamous marriages. You're infringing his rights if you don't do that. Right? Do you need to wait for the European courts to tell you a decision about that? I don't. I already know the answer. Okay, the answer is no, they shouldn't recognize polygamous marriage in any way, shape, or form. And I don't care what the European Court of Human Rights has to say. So we would leave that. We would be out. Right, so going back to the bathtub, you don't need to imagine it anymore. Going back to my bathtub analogy. So how do we turn the taps on? No, hang on, not turn the taps on. How do we put the plug in? Put the plug in the bath so that our own population can be sustained. When I say our own population, I'm not meaning like white people or native Scottish. I mean the people who are already here. People are already here. How can that be sustained? Well, we promote a culture of marriage. We've heard lots about that. We want a system of benefits, taxation, etc., that's going to reward marriage, certainly not penalize it. Now, again, reform. I mean, they talk a bit about marriage. They've got some policies about marriage. They're nothing like as strong as ours, but they do talk a little bit about promoting marriage. I mean, I would imagine Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, I mean, they give some pretty clear statements about the importance of marriage before going home to their partners at night. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? With the family party, we don't just throw these terms out because we think, that it's going to work, it's going to win some support, because we really believe them. Yeah. We really believe them. These are our principles. Right, so how are we going to increase the birth rate? Well, one of the ways is through financial support for parents. And I'm going to rattle through a few numbers here. Some countries like Poland and Hungary, if you say, what's the government's plan for the year? Top of the list would be family policy. We want to support parents. We want to encourage people to have as many children as they want to, not more than they want to, as many as they want to. And that's what it's like for us. This is not some little side issue. This is central to what we're all about. So I've just made a little list of all the benefits that a family would enjoy under the Scottish Family Party's policies. And I'm basing this on the sort of family that is the most discriminated against at the moment. And that's the family where, for example, dad is working and mum is, let's say they have 4 kids spaced out over, 10 or 15 years. So mum has 15 years off work, brings up 4 kids, and dad works, for example. So we're looking at that sort of family. What would they benefit from? Well, first of all, the woman would get maternity pay for every baby. So it's called maternity pay, but it shouldn't be called that. It's currently pay for mums who were working very recently, which is just not fair, is it? So if you've got a mum who has 1 baby, goes back to work for a couple of months, has another baby, goes back to work for a couple of months, like strings along the employer, they keep getting maternity pay. If you've got a mum who says, well, no, the next 8 years, 10 years, whatever, I want to commit to home life, that's my priority, then she doesn't get maternity pay. That's just totally wrong. So we would make it, if you're a mum, you get maternity pay. The clue's in the name, maternity pay for mums. Right, next one, child benefits. Currently, child benefits reduces a little bit for second and subsequent children. We would do away with that. Maternity pay, what's that worth to the mum? About £7,000. Child benefit through 18 years of a child's life, that's about £24,000. That's a bit more than it is now. Well, the Scottish government's approach to childcare is the ABM philosophy. ABM, anyone but mum. They don't care who's looking after a kid as long as it's not mum. So they're providing ever longer hours of nursery care. Now, nursery care, fine, but providing it all day for 3 and 4 year olds, this mum might think, well, I actually don't want my kid to be in nursery age 3 all day. Morning's enough. So if that's what she says, she gets the money back for the afternoon. A couple of £1,000 a year, £4,000 over 2 years. Our policy, another quarter of a tax allowance per dependent child. So assuming a basic rate taxpayer, over the 18 years of the child growing up, there's another £11,000. Council tax discount, quarter of a council tax discount per dependent child. Okay, average 4-bedroom house over 18 years, save £9,000. Free entry into attractions, £100 a year, couple of £1,000 over the 18 years of a childhood. What do they add up to? £54,000 per child. Plus, in addition to that, our policy is to have a fully transferable tax rate for married couples while they've got dependent children in the home. So again, on basic tax rate, that's another £45,000 over that period, not per child, but over that period. Right, that's a lot of money. Now, you can't be too precise. How much does it cost to bring up a child? No one's got some like figure to the nearest 10 pence or anything. But there are various ideas. But I think we can confidently say that those policies amount to net zero cost of bringing up a child. Everyone has to have a net zero policy these days, don't they? And the SNP and Labour, net zero carbon emissions, Reform, net zero immigration, Family Party, net zero cost of bringing up children. And say that reflects our priorities. So I think that would be best for Scotland, and encourage people to have as many children as they want to. It would also be better for children. Say the ABM approach, anyone but mum, it drives me nuts when you hear people from every party in the parliament saying children need the best start in life. They need the best start in life. So what we need is to get them away from their mum at the earliest possible stage for the maximum number of hours. And we think, no, that's not the best start in life. But we want families to make their own choices, and the choices that families make, as we were hearing earlier from Paul, is very often is people want to invest their time bringing up their own children. Now, that policy is costing a lot of money. Where's it going to come from? So we'd be like the other parties and just not worry about that and just say, don't worry about it. We'll worry about that when we get elected. No, obviously, tax rates or whatever are going to have to go up in other areas or people at other stages of life. But that's not to sort of punish people for not having children. It's not saying, oh, you didn't have any children, so we're putting your tax rate up. That'll teach you. You'll know better next time. It's not that at all. It's just practical. So you might even have a couple who really wanted to have children, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. Still, in their old age, they're going to want the NHS, they're going to want care services, they're going to need all sorts of things. Who's going to be working to pay the bill for those? It's going to be the children of the people who did have children. So it's not a sort of moral judgment on who's leading a more virtuous life, so much as just looking at the consequences, looking at what we need to be a sustainable society. Now, we've heard about the way the demographic collapse is just starting to bite. We heard from Christian, and we heard from Gareth on a live stream a little while ago as well, saying that nurseries in his area were closing and schools were reducing the number of classes in the lower year groups. And this is going to carry on. I mean, it obviously can be seen coming. Meanwhile, the BBC still loves stories about that this is a couple who decided to be happy and child-free. It'll have a picture of them sitting in some cafe in the south of France or something with a glass of wine. And it really presented as an ideal type of life. But I'm just going to tell a little story that David told me. I thought it was a great story. David and Jane were in Jerusalem. And there was someone selling carvings. I think it was a carving of the Last Supper, and they're quite expensive. So David was looking at it and he was thinking, well, that really is great. And the gentleman selling it was obviously quite a salesman. He said, oh, buy it here. Why don't you have one? Why don't you have one? And David said, we've got 4 kids already. We've got a 5th one on our way. I'm poor. I can't afford them. And the man selling it apparently got quite annoyed with David. He said, I'm making this up a little bit. He said, don't you dare say that. How dare you say that? If you've got 5 children, you're not poor. You're rich. And wouldn't it be fantastic if that attitude could just suffuse Scotland? If that was the way things were seen. Instead of people thinking, oh, children, oh, what a hassle. Oh, that's going to be a real pain. How are you going to cope with that problem in your life? If we just thought children are wealth to us, that would be a fantastic change. Right, education. I'm not going to say very much about education because someone else is going to sum it up for us in 2 minutes. Where's Hugh gone? Hugh. Right, just while Hugh comes to stage, you might have heard Hugh's voice before. You might recognize his voice. He's helped out in a couple of sketches in Scottish Family Party videos. But Hugh is going to give a very stark illustration of the state of Scottish education. Right, Hugh.
Good afternoon, conference. Thank you very much, Richard and the team, for letting me have this chance to speak for 2 minutes. I promise you I'll be as short as I can with my story on Scottish education. Now, I did something that was quite extreme. I actually moved country in order to get a better education for my children. Now, that move wasn't as far as you might think, because I was living in the Scottish borders at the time, and we moved to England, just to Alnwick, which is about 45 miles south of where I was living. But we made that decision because I have 2 children, my wife and 2 children, and my daughter has SEN needs. She was born with a cleft palate, and with that, it causes a lot of learning delays. So, for example, she didn't walk till she was 3, and she couldn't really cope with normal kind of. She's not at the same age level as her peers, and that gap, we were told, would continue to grow. So we put her into nursery. They were very keen to kind of put her onto primary school, even though we wanted to repeat a year, but the Scottish education system is against repeating a year. So we were kind of coerced into putting her into primary school, which we did. The problem was we saw the gap increasing, and even within just a few months of her starting, we went to our first ever parents' evening. And when you're proud new parents and you're looking forward to seeing the teacher and seeing what your child is hopefully trying to do, because the teachers are quite positive about your child. All the booklets were sitting there from the children, and we looked at our booklet for my daughter, and it was half finished. Nothing was completed. Nothing was there, and we weren't really told that she wasn't finishing her work. And so we said, why is it that the books are not completed? And she says, well, we have this policy. If they can't do the work, we offer them the chance to try and do it again, or to finish it, or to go and play. So in the classroom, they had a play area, and of course, my daughter, who sees the opportunity to play, will go and play. She's not going to, it's a kind of natural thing that a child will do. And they didn't seem to worry about that. And I said, come on, she needs to be working. You need to push her on. She needs a kind of quite strict environment, because my mother, who's a retired teacher, had been able to teach her poetry, and, she can take things in, she can learn things quite well. So we had this continual argument and kind of pushing with child psychologists, every kind of educational person you could think of in a room, all of them saying she'd grown in confidence. But when I asked the question, what about the growing gap of her education and what she knows, they couldn't answer. So we had to make a very radical decision that we had to move. We couldn't stay in Scotland with the situation that it was, but where our children were. We needed to do something very quickly to fix it. So we moved to Alnwick, which is one of the kind of, people say, one of the best places to live in the country in terms of quality of life. And we found a wonderful little Church of England school, and almost overnight the differences were apparent, because even my son, who doesn't have any issues in terms of requirements, he was seen as, when he was tested in English school, he was about a year behind in his reading and maths and things like that. Well, when you go to England and you ask someone, why did you move to England from Scotland? You say, well, education. And they all think Scottish education is brilliant. They think, why would you do such a thing? They haven't heard anything, have they? It's completely changed. It's just, their ideology is learning at your own pace. But if you have a child that has SEND needs, that pace is going to be very, very slow and will not help equip them to be ready to be independent, the children who are able to then grow up into adults and able to look after themselves and go on to great things. But in England, it was more traditional. Within a year, my son is now at the top of his class and doing really well and is growing in confidence in terms of real abilities and being able to do well. Even with my daughter especially, she's started to learn much better, and we were able to get the SEND support, and she's now in a school just on the coast there, and she is doing much better and being able to get the kind of teaching that she needs. But my encouragement, though, to the young couples here today, you don't have to do what I did in order to change the situation, because the policies here by the Scottish Family Party are really heartfelt, decent policies that will hopefully change this nation and change the way that education is run, because we need our voices to be heard and the influence to come out and to be effective, so that we can actually start to change the way, because kids, they need discipline, they need a good structure, and they need truth. Stick with the Scottish Family Party. I may be in England, but I'm with you in heart and soul, because I am Scottish, and I'm slightly nervous because Scotland is playing New Zealand at the moment, so I'm wondering what's going to happen there. But I will quickly give you back to Richard and what has been a fantastic day today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's an educational refugee amongst them. I mean, as you say, there's problems with education. I don't really see too many problems with Scottish education, apart from it being anti-meritocratic, therapeutic, sexualized, politicized, feminized, racialized, and indulgent. The big frustration I have with this is to put modesty aside, we could fix it. We could fix it. Now, there's some problems the country faces, like how should the NHS be managed? Oh, it's really complicated and they're really difficult problems. But education, we could fix it. We know what's the problem is. We know what values are wrong. We know how to change them, and we could do it. And let's hope one day we get the chance to do that. I mean, what else is going on in schools? This book about the sex, gender, sexuality, education. Sometimes I'm a bit frustrated. It feels a bit old hat. People have heard all this. People were interested in this a few years ago, but there's not quite the same buzz about it, which is a shame, because now is the time when this is in action. This is when it's being used in schools all over the country, and it's damaging children. It is harming children. So it's the moral equivalent of saying to them, hey, do you fancy trying smoking? Some people are smokers, some people are not. Well, we'll give you a cigarette if you want to give it a try. It's that irresponsible. It's that wrong. So we try and keep that issue on the boil. When the Scottish government introduced its transgender guidance for schools, which is appalling, it says if a kid says they want to change gender, you say, okay, do you want us to tell mum or dad or not? And if the kid says, no, I think I'll keep it secret from mum and dad, then the teacher is supposed to say, the school will say, okay, that's fine, we'll keep it a secret. We'll keep it our little secret here. Absolutely beyond the pale. When that guidance was introduced, we had a protest at the Parliament. Quite a lot of people there. Quite a lot of people. But again, a big thing at the start, but this is still going on. I still hear stories of lives wrecked, families torn apart by this government policy. The other thing to mention as well with the sex education is the LGB aspect. This doesn't get talked about so much, but basically children are taught lesbian, gay, bisexual relationships are equally valid and should just be celebrated. But I say the facts don't line up with that. The facts disagree. The fact is lesbian, gay, bisexual relationships tend to lead to negative outcomes. In many ways, they don't look like a positive life choice. And children are basically being misled. They're told, oh, you can choose this sort of relationship, you can choose this sort, it'll all be probably fine, it's all just the same. Well, the facts are that it's not. Now, when we hear from Reform have just published a little, I don't know, probably a couple of hundred words of Scottish policy. I think it's the first Scottish policy they've had. One of them was they're going to remove woke policies in schools. I mean, what's that mean? What does that mean? That's not good enough. That's just populism. Remove woke policies. How does that line up against promoting a culture of marriage to children, undermining a culture of promiscuity? If you imagine a school They're doing their LGBT lessons, are all going strong, celebrating LGBT relationships, encouraging pupils to experiment if they want to. I think reform would come in and they would get that pride flag taken down off the top of the school. That would go. But everything else, I think, would carry on exactly as it is now. Right, moving on to another one of our central issues, the issue of life. I'm going to keep it simple. We've heard about it already. But this is the simple way of looking at it. If the SNP win the Scottish election, then what will happen in the years after? About 19,000 children in the womb will be killed by the government every year. If Labour win it, about 19,000 children in the womb will be killed every year going forward. If the Conservatives were to win, it's not looking very likely at the moment, but if they were, then about 19,000 lives in the womb would be taken by the state every year. If the Lib Dems win, 19,000. If the Greens win, 19,000. They'd be wishing it was a few more, but 19,000. If Alba win, 19,000. If Reform win, 19,000 roughly. If the Scottish Family Party win, approximately zero. That's the central truth we need to keep coming back to. Now, people say, no, what about women? Do you care about women? Of course we care about women. We've got policies to, well, first of all, to encourage responsibility in sexual relationships. Let's try and have people be able to avoid finding themselves in very difficult, stressful situations. Where women do find themselves with a crisis pregnancy, then our policy is there should be support available. Okay, there should be sympathy, compassion, and support. But as we heard from Christians so powerfully, abortion is the only medical treatment that has no measurable benefits for the recipients. It only has harms. There is no study that says women who have abortion, this is the way it benefits their health. There's none, not one. But there are scores that show the harm that it does. So in stopping women having abortions, through taking away the availability of abortion, we protect women from making a bad decision that leads to very serious harms in the longer term. Now, our challenge on this issue is always, I think there's slowly progress, but our challenge is you get some people with, pro-life views, but they'll still vote for a pro-abortion party. And then you'll go to a pro-life demonstration. You'll meet a pro-life activist standing there with their placard, "Every life is precious," taking abuse from counter-protesters. You think, wow, he's a brother, sister, pro-life activist. Then you have a chat to them, they vote for a pro-abortion party. Then you find some people who work for pro-life organizations. They're devoting their whole life to the pro-life cause. And you chat to them, and then you find out they vote for a pro-abortion party. And I think our mission as a family party is to help people to see that this is not fine. This doesn't make sense. This is not normal. This is a hypocrisy. This is a denial of people's own conscience. In a democracy, election day is when the nation stops and says to you, we want your opinion. We want your opinion on how this country is going to be run. And if you vote for a party that's pro-abortion, then you're giving your approval. So you may say, oh, well, I don't really like that policy. I'm voting for them because there are other policies. But still, if you vote for a party, you're giving your endorsement to the whole platform of that party. And how many times have I said that? How many times have I written it? How many more times will I need to say it? Who knows? But we need to keep saying it because the penny does drop. The penny does drop. People are influenced by it time and time again. I have this conversation and you end up thinking, you know what? I think I've got somewhere there. I think that made them think. I think we're seeing some change in the thinking. Now, it was mentioned earlier on, pro-life views are growing. Young men aged 18 to 36, according to research in May this year, 36% say abortion should be always or usually illegal. As far as I'm concerned, that's basically a pro-life position. I mean, which of those boxes would you tick? Always or mostly? I'm not quite sure which one I would tick. Depends. But that is a lot, 36%. How is it happening? To me, it is a total mystery of what is going on among young men and younger people in general that's making them more pro-life. Is it American influence that they're tuning into? Is it some sort of spiritual thing? I really don't know. So that's young men. But if you look at the views on abortion for women as well, it's the youngest women who have the most pro-life views. It's the youngest women. I've been hearing this for years. The younger generations have got more socially conservative values, and we see it coming through. This effect is getting more and more pronounced. So our challenge, convert it into votes. Convert this into a political issue. Now, I think some pro-life activists, people with strong pro-life views, they get fobbed off with scraps from the other parties. I'm going to vote for that party because most of them voted against decriminalization, abortion decriminalization. I say, okay, yeah, that's good. Let's go back to my statistics. So how many lives will be taken by abortion under this party? 19,000. The decriminalization, how much difference would that make to the numbers? It would be a handful, probably. So basically, it's just the same. We mustn't be fobbed off with scraps. Another scrap that's been offered to pro-lifers is Nigel Farage saying, we should have a discussion about whether the limit should be 24 weeks or maybe 22 weeks. He's not quite sure, but he'd like there to be a discussion. And then you get lots of pro-life people saying, oh, it's really fantastic. Look at Nigel Farage. What's he done? He said he's pro-choice. But somehow or other, people, I guess, their expectations are so low that when we're thrown a scrap, some pro-lifers, oh, it's so wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us that. Really, really nothing in the grand scheme of things. Just while we're on the subject of reform, I'm taking a swipe at them quite often here. Let's just have another one. While we're on the subject of buffer zones, this is another peripheral issue around the pro-life case. Let's say I was there when Rose Doherty was arrested the first time. The police got there probably in about 15 minutes on one occasion, about 15 minutes to get 8 police officers on the scene, ready to swoop into action to get Rose pushed in the back of it, handcuffed and pushed in the back of a police car. Now, as Mary mentioned in the vigil in Edinburgh, they had some very unpleasant encounters with a genuinely nasty, aggressive man who pushed someone, swiping signs out of the way and saying basically, I don't care if you call the police, I've been to prison, I'm going to punch you in the face. So the police were called. How long do you think it takes the police to deal with that? 15 minutes? No, they were within about a week. I think they were maybe getting around to taking some statements and maybe trying to trace who this man was, got his car number plate. Quite a contrast. Quite a contrast. But just going back to reform and buffer zones, what do you hear there? Nothing. Nothing. It's a bit too controversial for reform. Now, when it comes to freedom of speech, Lucy Connolly, she's on reform's wavelength. This is the woman who tweeted that she didn't care if asylum hotels got burned down with the asylum seekers in them. Okay, she apologized, she deleted it, or whatever. Now, Nigel Farage is happy to hold her hand aloft on the reform platform and say, freedom of speech, we're with you, Lucy Connolly. Whereas when a pro-life activist gets arrested in a buffer zone, reform are silent. A bit too controversial, a bit too scary for them to get involved in that. They're more happy on the safer free speech territory. So I think with the pro-life issue, we must be careful of what I made this turn up myself, currency bias, and that's to focus on the latest bad idea in the Parliament. There's always a latest problem. There's buffer zones, there's pills by post, there's decriminalization. I mean, who knows? All sorts of things will come. And the temptation is to focus on the latest bill in the Parliament. Can we stop this one going through? All the eyes are on that. But I would say, no, let's not focus on the latest little tweak. Let's keep our eyes on where I started, 19,000 as opposed to 0. That's the issue. These other things are side issues. The ongoing industrial scale killing of children in the womb is the main issue. And the other issues just give us an opportunity to talk about the main issue. That's the way I see it. When it comes to voting, I like the saying, evil may come, but it's not going to come through me. And I think you can change that slightly. Evil may come, but I'm not going to vote for it. It's not going to come through my vote. And that's the spirit, that's the attitude we want to spread through Scotland. Now, assisted suicide, Gordon, that was fantastic earlier on. I learned a lot there about what's going on in there. But to be honest, will it pass this time? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. When a new parliament's elected, basically, I think they'll probably come back at it, and it will happen sooner or later, but hopefully this current one is defeated. But for the family party, there's no ifs and buts. You don't need to bother writing to your family party candidate, asking them how they'd vote on assisted suicide. We oppose it every time. Every candidate opposes it. And if it passes, we would repeal it. Because the way these things often go is, they pass, there's a controversy, some people have dragged their heels about it, some people don't like it, then it passes, and that's it. You don't hear any more about it. Well, they would hear more about it from the Scottish Family Party. If assisted suicide passes, we will oppose it until it is repealed. Every life is precious. Now, the same with assisted suicide. You get people saying, oh, I oppose it utterly. It's terrible. What an evil. What's our nation coming to? And I say, did you vote for a pro-life party next time? Oh, no, I don't think it's that terrible. I'm not that extreme. Let's just be reasonable about this. So if we could connect together people's moral outrage with where they put that cross in a box on election day, well, that's our route to growth. And often that's the final step. People get what's wrong. People get what's wrong with abortion. People get what's wrong with assisted suicide. But the final step of actually don't vote for people who are going to do it, that's often our challenge. Now, we've heard a bit about the election next year. I can't wait for the election campaign next year. Scottish election campaigns are brilliant. He said, with experience of one. We've only had one before. Usually with the Scottish Family Party, we're thinking, what can we do to get any attention? How is anyone going to take any notice of us? And we try and come up with ideas and try and get attention. Suddenly in election time, newspapers, TV stations, they're phoning up saying, oh, can we speak to someone? Can you supply someone? Can you send us your policies? Can you do this? Can you turn up here? And that's great. That's fantastic. What an opportunity. We'll have a party election broadcast. Again, Phil is going to work on that. And that will be on BBC and STV. We'll get it on social media as well. As before, we want to put a leaflet through every letterbox in Scotland. Royal Mail do the delivery for nothing, so it's relatively cheap. But think about that, a leaflet through every letterbox in Scotland. So probably literally millions of people are going to pick it. Maybe they'll pick it up, and while they're walking to the bin with it, they might just pick up that there's a pro-life issue might be relevant in this election. Okay, assisted suicide. This is a really important issue. Maybe you should think about voting on the basis of that. So that's a really important thing to us. So again, on the media, we'll have local events. Millions of people will become aware of the family party. Lots of people will become our supporters. In the last Scottish election, lots of people became members. And that's brilliant. Lots of those members became activists. A lot of the people here, how did you hear about the family party? During the 2021 election campaign. So it's a really important phase for us to grow and to keep building. Let's say we need 40 candidates. On this, we need about £50,000 would be a good campaign budget. So, anything you can contribute to those, much appreciated. Now, I think the soil is a bit more fertile at this Scottish election. I think we form a competition, because they overlap with us a little bit on some things, but I think the soil is more fertile. I think more people are waking up to the importance of these issues and recognizing them as political issues. So I can't wait. The less good side of the election campaign is, we put phone numbers on the leaflets, and you just get like several abusive phone calls a day. At the last election campaign, we had all sorts of unpleasant objects sent to us through the post. I won't go into detail. So it's, we've got to have it. Yeah, where's Johnny? Yeah, Johnny said, I've got a thick skin. You need a thick skin in the election campaign. But I can't wait. It's our big opportunity to grow. Let's say, I think the tide is turning in our favor. More socially conservative values are on the up, particularly among young men, but among younger people in general. And we keep hearing about the beginnings, I don't know what word to use, like beginnings of a revival of interest in Christianity or revival of Christianity. I don't know what you put it, but basically more people are wanting to go to church and find out about this set of principles and look into what the Christian faith has got to offer, including in the political sphere. Now, Now, I think with the Reform Party, I used to talk, before Reform really grew, at the last election, by the way, we got 3 times as many votes as Reform in Scotland. If we get 3 times as many as this time, I'll be the first minister. So quite a change. But I used to talk about the conservative delusion. I used to talk about the conservative delusion. People who thought, I'm in the Conservative Party. All that nonsense from Labour and the SNP. Oh, I don't have any of that. I'm in the Conservatives. And, there's a few of us in the Conservatives who've got these values. And we're going to change it from the inside. We're really going to influence it. And where's it go? It just doesn't go anywhere. I think with Reform, it is a false dawn. People who think they're going to change it from within, well, basically, they're not. I think I'm going to be talking about the Reform delusion before too long. When it comes to pro-life, for example, assisted suicide, Reform are not going to be taking policy positions on those. Assisted suicide, that would cut their membership right down the middle. It cut their MPs down the middle. There'll be a total muddle on that issue. They're never going to take a policy position. And as Christian was saying, the value of human life, where does that come in the priorities? Well, I say it comes at number 1. It comes number 1. Okay, let's look at my crystal ball here. Let's imagine Reform are going to have their day. What comes after then? No government lasts forever. How long will they last? Who knows? After then, in my crystal ball, I see maybe Greens or some sort of Corbyn party taking over. Heaven forbid. That would be a total disaster. What comes after then? But it doesn't bear thinking about, does it? Things are very volatile in politics. And that might not be good for the country, but it could be good for the Scottish Family Party. It gives us opportunities. Things are shifting, things are getting churned up, and people are going to be looking for something new. Another little hopeful sign here. They say now there's 5 big parties in UK politics. Scotland, similar situation. How long until proportional representation comes on the agenda seriously? Because when you've got the Greens and Lib Dems and Conservative Labour, you've got all these parties with a handful of seats, and they'll all be thinking, this is not fair. We deserve, with the number of votes we've got, we deserve more seats. Reform say they want PR. They've gone quiet on it since it looks like they're going to benefit from the current system. But will we end up in a stage where at UK and Scottish level will end up with proportional representation? I think it's very, very possible. What difference would that make? At the last election, if Scotland had full proportional representation, I believe I would be an MSP now. In other words, a fair voting system where if you got 129th of the votes, you got 129th of the MSPs, in other words, 1. So I believe I would be an MSP now if we had a fair voting system. I believe in the next few years, it's very possible that we might end up with a fair voting system. And that will be fantastic. So let's see the way that turns out. Another issue coming up. All this turbulence, who knows what's going to happen with Scottish independence? The Family Party is neutral. We've got people in this room who support Scottish independence. We've got people who don't. If Scotland did become independent, I think from the Family Party's selfish point of view, if you like, I think it would probably be a good thing. But one of my sadnesses as a leader of the Scottish Family Party is to have conversations with people and they'll say, Family Party, I really love your policies. You're right on the ball there. You're totally correct. I'm right behind you, but we need to get Scottish independence first. Once we've got Scottish independence, we can then focus on all these other issues. And I always think, no. How can that possibly be right? How can you say, we need to get Scottish independence, then after then we'll worry about protecting the unborn, encouraging family life, stopping children being corrupted in school? Surely it's got to be the other way around. Surely it should be, we've got to protect every human life. We've got to enable childhood. We've got to promote family life. Once we've got the basics in place, then maybe think about Scottish independence. So it's one of my sadnesses that there are still so many people I find who cannot put Scottish independence, maybe unionism with some people as well, away from the top of their priorities. But hopefully as time goes on, more and more people will be persuaded. Now, an MSP that I was talking to once, I know quite well, he said the key thing in politics is to be in the game, ready for when your turn comes. I think his party had been in the doldrums, but then a massive surge, and maybe not so great anymore. So the key thing is to be in the game for when your time comes. I think our time is coming. And in the meantime, we build. People now know we're permanent. We're not a flash in the pan. There's always new parties popping up and disappearing. People are realizing the Scottish Family Party is not one of them. We're here for the long term. And we communicate to people that we're competent, we're principled, and we're bold. Now, there's something very strange happening in politics at the moment, certainly in Britain, certainly in America, but particularly in Britain, and we heard a little bit about it earlier on, is people just can't stop talking about Christianity. I mean, John Swinney was at it last week. I'm a Christian. My Christian faith informs my policies. My Christian faith makes me the person I am, etc., etc. So you've got everyone from Nigel Farage to John Swinney, they're wanting to talk about their Christian faith and how it influences them, etc., etc. So you've got people saying we need a Christian culture, we need Christian identity, we need Christian morals. Now, when people are saying all this, how do I react? Well, my main reaction is, well, great. I'm glad this has been talked about. I'm glad people are recognizing that there's something valuable here. But I also want to say, often the people saying that, they don't really have the Christian values. They don't have the real things. They just want the label. They just think it's a campaigning slogan. They think Christian means definitely not Muslim. But I think we've got the real thing. The illustration I've used, it's like if you met someone who said, I am an undying supporter of Falkirk Football Club, absolutely committed to them, totally devoted. I wear their strip all the time. I argue with the fellow fans. I even get into a bit of a punch-up with some of the fans from the rival teams sometimes. You say, all right, okay, do you ever go to the games? No, don't go to the games. Do you know who's in the team? No, I don't really follow it. Do you even know the rules of football? No, I don't know. That's the sort of situation we're in. What do you want to say to that sort of person? Do you want to say to them, oh, you're not a proper fan. Stop calling yourself a Falkirk fan. No, I don't really want to say that. I want to say, well, if you want to talk about all this stuff, how about coming to the game? How about finding out the rules of the game? How about finding who's on the team? How about actually understanding what this is all about? I think that is an opportunity for us. Now, when we took the policy votes, one of them was about Sunday, rules relating to Sunday. Are there some changes we could make to try and enable families to have a common day of rest? I think that one of the cases I think of is, let's say, the car sales industry. So if you're selling cars, new cars, if all the car dealers closed on a Sunday, would fewer cars get sold? Well, no. I don't think you're going to have anyone saying, yeah, I'm on the bus. I would have bought a car a couple of years ago, but the showroom was closed on Sundays. So I thought I'd just go on that. Of course not. You're going to sell just as many cars, but the business will be more efficient because they only need to open 6 days instead of 7. And the staff, well, there's companies making as much money, so they can still pay the staff the same, but they could just work 6 days. So where there's opportunities for that, we should explore it. So why wasn't that family party policy from day one? I remember talking about it to people, and I said, if we put that in, we'll just be labelled, you're just Christian party. You're just Christians. It's only Christians who talk about trying to have Sunday as a day of rest. So I think we would be instantly labelled as Christian. I think that would be negative. So what's changed? I look at it now and think, well, everyone's trying to be Christian in politics. Everyone's trying to talk about Christianity. So why don't we bring in, I say, a bit of genuine Christian principle there? And that's what we've done. Now, just talking about Christians and churches, Christian organizations, the focus tends to be virtually 100% on persuading people. We've got some politicians elected. We're going to try and persuade them. We're going to try and change their minds. We're going to have meetings with them, etc., which is fine, which is all well and good. But if you think about that strategy, with the family party, there have been 3 things I would say we've warned about since we started. 3 ogres on the horizon. These are the things that are coming. We need to oppose them. What were they? Abortion decriminalization, assisted suicide, and a conversion therapy ban. They're the 3 things we said, right, these are very bad news, and we think they're coming. Within the next year, we could have all 3 of them. They could all be done. And I would say that's time for Christians in particular to take stock and say, how is this persuasion strategy working out? And the answer, I think, is it is not. Now, President Trump went to give a speech at the Turning Point USA conference, at Charlie Kirk's organization, a couple of years ago. And he said something that wasn't really that pro-life. He tried to be a bit middle of the road. And so guess what happened among this Republican audience, real Trump fans? Guess what happened when he said something that actually didn't sound very pro-life? They booed him. They booed him. And lots of pro-life organizations in America made public statements and said, basically, listen, Trumpy boy, if you go around saying things like that, you can forget it. We're not going to be backing you. So Trump sort of backed down and made some more pro-life comments and learned his lesson, and on it went. What a contrast. I wish Scotland was like that. I wish Scotland was like that. But it's totally the opposite. Murdo Fraser. I mention his name. I'm not meaning to be like cruel to Murdo Fraser. Anyway, Murdo Fraser, in his election campaign to become Conservative leader, he said, I am pro-choice. His next line was, I am a Christian, but he said, I am pro-choice. Now, I think Murdo Fraser, when he was thinking about what he was going to say, he should have thought, okay, let me weigh this up. I need to say I'm pro-choice in order to get a chance of becoming Conservative leader. But if I say it, I've really burnt my bridges with all the Christian organizations. I'm really persona non grata on the Christian circuit if I say that. That's what he should have been thinking. But he didn't need to think that. He could think, I can say I'm pro-choice, but it makes no difference. He's still the guest of honor at Christian campaign, pro-life Christian groups. Groups who look at their core mission. Their core mission is to argue for the value of every human life. And then they have someone who says, I am pro-choice, and he's the guest of honor. He's the keynote speaker. And what is going on? Why does this happen in the church in Britain? It's like the Christians, the church, it's like the army that won't declare war. Our country's been invaded. Cities are turned to rubble, killing indiscriminately. But the response is, we can probably stay friends, can't we? Can we not meet up for a coffee and try and talk about this? I'm sure we can work it out. No, we've got enemies. In the political sphere, we have enemies. People who oppose our core principles are enemies. Now, we're supposed to love our enemies, but we're not supposed to pretend that we don't have enemies. So on the pro-life cause, people who want to continue the killing of unborn children, like Murdo Fraser, for me, he's a political enemy. He is a political enemy and should be treated as such. So my mission is to replace Murdo Fraser in the Scottish Parliament. I don't want him to be there. I want people in there who value human life. That's what we want to do. Now, Charlie Kirk's assassination was a shocking event, had very powerful ramifications around the world. But it was interesting to see his method, wasn't it? Very bold, very straight talking, and mixed his politics with his faith. I don't agree with anyone about everything. And I can say that about Charlie Kirk as well. But an awful lot of what he was saying, which was basically straightforward Christian teaching, and a lot of what he was saying basically was family party teaching as well. So that's one example. Very powerful, huge online impact. And maybe this is why we're seeing these changes among young people. May it be figures like that people are hearing online, bypassing the mainstream media, bypassing teachers in the classroom, getting straight to young people, and their views are changing. So that's one approach. You stand up, you tell it straight. Lots of people want to hear because it's interesting. It's bold, it's novel. But the approach more common among Christians at the moment in Scotland is no. The strategy is to try and keep quiet, to avoid talking about controversial things, to be really nice, or the favorite word, to be really winsome. And eventually people will like us so much, and we'll show that we're on side with a lot of the progressive issues. We'll show we're quite feminist. We'll do the Black Lives Matter thing. We'll do the climate change thing. If we can just do those things, then people will like us and we will be away. People who want to talk about like pro-life issue, we really wish they wouldn't, because that like spoils things. That puts people off church. God's truth puts people off. But is that changing? I'm hoping that is beginning to change in Scotland. I really am. And as the Scottish Family Party, that's part of our mission, is to help Christians to see this through and to have confidence in the truth that they believe in. Because you get people who believe the same things we believe. They believe in the principles behind our policies. That's step number one. Step number two, the people think, yeah, I believe that. And actually, it's really important. Step number 3, this is really important, and it matters for other people. People are being harmed by these values being ignored. For the sake of other people, these values are critical. But step number 4, these values are so important, I need to speak about them. We've got to talk about them. People need to hear them. Step number 5, which often feels like the most difficult one, but actually you need to vote on the basis of them as well. You need to vote for them. It's like dominoes falling. And I feel like actually voting for what you believe in feels like the last domino to fall often. But I think with lots of people, lots of organizations, the dominoes are falling one by one, and eventually it's going to get to us. Now, I'm almost there, not too long to go. I had a huge book about the history of Christianity I read a little while ago. And to be honest, a substantial majority of it was pretty depressing to read. Because a lot of the history of Christianity is one type of Christians get the power, and what do? They hammer the other type. They persecute them, forced conversions, close their churches down, make their types of service illegal, and then eventually another side gets in power, and then they do the exact same in reverse. Scotland, I mean, what a story. That's exactly what's happened. The Catholics, Protestants, they've got Presbyterians, Episcopalians. It was just taken for granted. If your side gets the power, then what you do is you hammer the other side. You suppress them, you ban them, and you try and eliminate them. Man, what a disaster. What a depressing story. How different it is for us here today. How different. We're not in this thinking, right, well, we can come forward and we can grab the levers of power in order to hammer the wrong sort of Christians. None of us want to do that. We're saying we want to have influence on the nation for the good of everyone, because we share values that can make this nation a better place. What a total contrast to a lot of the sad history of Christianity. Right, I'll just wind up now. Right, Reform UK, this is my last little mention of them here. They say things like, we need to treasure our heritage. We need to preserve our culture. We need to be proud of our nation. And to be honest, I'm right with them. I'm 100% with them. I'm a patriotic sort of person. But let's take that a little bit deeper. Treasure our heritage. What's a heritage in Scotland? Well, slavery abolitionists, people who pioneered education, particularly for the poor, excellent education for the poor, people who campaigned against poverty, prostitution, tried to tackle the issue of alcohol abuse, tried to encourage responsibility in the family. That's our heritage, and that's what I treasure. Now, there's something uniquely special about Scots. If you look at the history, and they just seem so stubborn. If a Scot's got a principle, if their conscience tells them something, well, frankly, you're wasting your time threatening to burn them or torture them or whatever, because it's not going to work. That is the history of the Scottish people. Right? That is a fantastic thing. People of principle. People of principle. So treasure our heritage? Absolutely. Including those things. Preserve our culture. Yeah, I'm absolutely behind it. I do want to preserve our culture. But I also want to help to create a culture that's worth preserving as well. A culture that believes in the future and wants a future for itself. A culture of family responsibility and goodness. Pride in our nation. Yeah, I'm behind that. I'm behind that. But also I want to create a nation that we can be even more proud of. And nation embodying integrity, decency, and compassion. Now, I really love Scotland. So if anyone's coming, I love showing them around. I want to show everyone Scotland. It's a great place. I really, really love it. I would say, I'm proud of it. Do you know what would make me even more proud? So proud of Scotland. If Scotland became the first nation in the UK to protect every precious human life. I would be proud of that, and I would also be proud of the part we've played in bringing that about. Thank you.